everyone, and welcome to No Offseason. I'm Zena.
I'm Sabreena Merchant.
And I'm Ben Pickman.
And today on the show, the WNBA has reached huge heights. But the offseason brings a new kind of pressure, with nearly every veteran player in the league becoming a free agent, a CBA still needing to be hammered out, 2 new teams joining the league. This offseason is sure to be pretty insane. We're here to hear some of those big questions and answer some of those questions of what exactly is the story with free agency and how will it impact some of those bigger questions that we have for certain teams in the coming months. But first, we got some news from around the association. This season in the W, both regular season and postseason, was the most viewed season ever. Shout out Richard Deitch for his piece on this and The Athletic live now. Go check it out. Postseason games averaged 1.2 million viewers, up 5% from last year. And all that growth leads us to a nicely new segment that we're going to call Deal or No Deal. Ben, the deadline for a new CBA in the W is rapidly approaching. Halloween is going to be scarier for more reasons than one October 31st. Deal or no deal, where do things stand?
Currently, they stand at no deal, Zena. And I know we have just debuted this segment, but at least in the next 2 weeks, I think we should give it a temporary amendment to the name and call it extension or no extension, because that is really the question that is at stake right now, because the two sides seem to still be pretty far apart in terms of the league and the PA as they negotiate this deal. There still seems to be hang up on the key issues, salary structures and salaries. Those are really the two topics that we have been talking about throughout this entire process since the PA opted out of the old agreement last fall. With 2 weeks to go, the sides are still continuing to meet. We have heard that from both sides. Kathy Youngbert was open about that at her press conference ahead of the finals. And look, she has said that I feel confident we can get a deal done, but if not, I think we could do an extension. And that is kind of an acknowledgement, or that was an acknowledgement that that is a possibility. We have seen an extension be reached as recently as the last CBA agreement in 2020. So that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to miss games come May. But yeah, I would not bet that a deal gets signed by the October 31st deadline.
I'm really happy that you brought up the word extension and as we're talking about deal, because it is important to kind of break down how these different aspects of this negotiation can impact the players, especially. So if a deal isn't done by October 31st and there is no extension to negotiate the deal, that's what would trigger the lockout. Sabreena, explain that for us.
You said it exactly right. It would trigger a lockout if they don't agree to a deal by October 31st and there is no extension. And practically what that means is it's not like they're not still trying to find a new CPA. Like they would still be working on creating a new one. But at the moment, that means that the WNBA players are locked out, so to speak, from WNBA facilities, which means like if you're a player in market, you can't go to your practice facility anymore, right? Like you can't technically be in contact with like the ownership and front office and stuff like that, people who are employed by the team. So it actually has a more material difference, I think, now than it would have 6 years ago when like, would there be a facility for you to go to market? Like, no. But there is actual like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like they can actually be locked out of facilities in a way that like would materially impact the players during their offseason time.
There is also a public signaling that an extension indicates, and that's how it was phrased to me from kind of legal experts who have worked on CBAs in the past, that, you know, the thought or the public agreement of an extension seems to indicate that the sides are actively working towards a deal and are very much committed to getting one done. That's not to say that if there isn't an extension done by October 31st, like the two sides will not get a deal done, because again, I am not saying that. But I think it shows that like we are very much committed to making progress. And also we want to, you know, do what Sabreena just said. We'll let the players continue to, you know, use the facility just as one example or receive medical treatment there, you know, as an offshoot of that. But like, we'll see what happens as it relates to this extension. No side right now publicly wants to say like, yes, we are going to agree to an extension 2 weeks out of this deadline.
And I imagine that both sides also don't want a lockout. This stops and kills the momentum of the league, especially as we're getting this data of wrapping up one of the most prolific WNBA seasons in terms of viewership engagement. Having a lockout would just absolutely kill that fire. And so you definitely I don't want to see it. I don't think any fans want to see it. We'll see what happens with this situation. Obviously, we'll be very close to it here. Keep locked on The Athletic because Ben, Sabreena are really breaking this down really nicely. Last question for you, Ben. Chances right now of a lockout?
Well, there's a difference between a lockout and a work stoppage here, and
Okay.
also the possibility of missed games. Do I think we're going to miss games in May? Like, I think a lot of people
Yeah.
still don't want that to be the case. But if the question is, again, will there be a deal done by October 31st? I would say no. Then it's kind of up for those two sides to determine and figure it out amongst themselves, basically. Are players going to be locked out, or is there just going to be a temporary extension in this negotiation? I don't really know the answer to that. That's more of a legal pathway, depending on what the two sides want to figure out.
Sure. I had someone on Blue Sky ask the question, like, to the extent that they extend this negotiation outside of the October 31st deadline, how much could that like actually impact the work stoppage that you're talking about, basically missing games and next season? There is so much time. And in the 2020 CBA negotiation, they had to delay free agency, but that was the extent of the timeline being moved. Games weren't missed, so it all worked out in that regard. Now, well, games weren't missed for that reason. Games were missed because of COVID, but for not for the negotiation aspect. All right. In other news, the Portland Fire, one of the W's newest franchises, set to make their debut next year, have been in a hot mess for a little while now. We've seen a lot of headlines, and headlines go away, of what's going on behind in their front office. And to add to that story, they made a social media blunder earlier this week. Interestingly enough, it immediately made me think of the Toronto Tempo and their name being in the drop-down menu on the WNBA website before their name was announced. And I'm like, maybe we're the two teams are just like, let's just be even, right? Let's just look out for each other and let's be even on these blunders. But on LinkedIn, Portland Fire announced their coach. Of all places, LinkedIn. I know there are more athletes on there now. I don't know if there's a lot of WNBA fans that are looking for their news on LinkedIn, but
Zena, that is the place to make career announcements, though. I mean, who
I
among
get
us has not announced career updates on LinkedIn first before going to Twitter? I don't
fair.
understand the
I
disdain
have
for
not.
LinkedIn.
I have
I
not.
have not done that for what it's worth. But you're right. Even if someone's like announcing their career, this is the team announcing their hire, right? That felt strange. Sabreena, what happened exactly? Because I wasn't on LinkedIn. I'm not on LinkedIn as much as I probably used to be in corporate America. But now, apparently, I got to be on there to find out who the new coaches in the WNBA are.
Yeah, so really briefly on Tuesday morning, it was announced that the Portland Fire were hiring Alex Sarama as the franchise's first head coach, and then it was swiftly deleted, but not before some people saw the announcement, put it on
Ooh.
Reddit because that is where WNBA news goes, is on Reddit, and uh, that is an interesting name to have put out as the potential hiring of a Portland Fire head coach because in our reporting about the coaching searches, that has been the front runner name that has been associated with the Portland Fire. He's an NBA assistant coach. He worked with Vanya Cernovich, the new general manager of the Portland Fire, both at the NBA academies in Madrid and also, or sorry, NBA Europe, I should say, in Madrid, and also at the London Lions, where she was previously working before coming to the Golden State Valkyries. He has been on a couple of NBA staffs, including the Rip City Remix, which is the Portland G League team, most recently the director of player development at the Cleveland Cavaliers. So a lot of the types of experiences that we've heard in terms of like what people are looking for in new WNBA head coaches, right? Like a little bit of mix of international, NBA, obviously familiarity with the person who's hiring you. That's the most important thing. So the fact that his name was leaked as the head coach, not at all surprising. That it was done in this manner, very surprising.
Not according to Ben.
My thought process here, just real quick. The Portland Fire
Yes.
also announced on Tuesday that they were hiring Ashley Battle, former WNBA veteran, former GM of the Maine Celtics, as their number
Mhm.
2 vice president of basketball operations. So is it possible that there was a release for Ashley Battle, a release for Alex Sarama, and the wrong one just went up Tuesday morning?
Ooh, okay. Okay, well, I want to ask you, Ben, if it does, I mean, it sounds like it's going to be Alex Sarama, but if they do re-announce it, are you saying LinkedIn is the right way to do this again?
I hope they lean into the bit. If that, acknowledge your kind of mistake and poke fun at it. I think we
Yeah.
would appreciate if that was the case. No, I don't necessarily think they're going to go that route in terms of the platform in which they announce the news as it relates to Alex Sarama's candidacy. Yeah, I think as Sabreena said, He's kind of emerged as the front runner in this situation. He's still under contract with the Cleveland Cavaliers, and so from what we understand, before any kind of agreement potential agreement has to get placed. Like in these situations, if you're under contract with one team, no matter the sport, like you usually have to get clearance or permission to, break that contract before agreeing to a new potential deal. I envision or imagine that is the kind of situation that is going on behind the scenes right now in Portland as it relates to Alex Arama. That's not to say it is a done deal because, again, the two sides still very much seemingly need to finalize a deal. But yeah, he is the front runner. We should also say Sabreena mentions Ashley Battle. Her name, she comes from, I guess, the Connecticut Sun most recently. She has experience with the Boston Celtics, and the Maine Red Claws is their GM, their NBA G League affiliate. She also crossed paths with Vanya Chernovic at the NBA office. So they have, again, think about relationships among people. It makes sense that, these are two people who have known each other, have worked together. She has been, she is basically the second front office hire that has been made in Portland, and that is the announcement that we now know is officially official. We're still waiting on the head coach, as Sabreena said.
Turn on your notifications on LinkedIn, because apparently that's where we should be looking. Let's turn our attention to another favorite topic, officiating. The NBA announced 3 new referees that will be joining their ranks this year. Among them, Jenna Renault, who listeners might remember as one of the 3 officials who refed Game 3 of the Lynx Mercury series. Yes, the infamous game which Cheryl Reeve was ejected from and later fined and suspended for, among other things, her public comments criticizing officiating. If you need just a little bit of a boost for your memory, because, you might be getting a little bit older, this was the game that Cheryl Reeve said these 3 refs it was effing malpractice that they were allowed or selected to referee a semifinals game. So let's talk about this. Sabreena, you posted something that helped me pay attention to verbiage. And, semantics are important, I think. But what did you notice about this announcement?
Hardly call it semantics. Word choice is very, very
Choice is real.
purposeful here. So on the one hand, very funny that a WNBA coach would go on the record saying it was effing malpractice that a certain ref was assigned something, and then that ref would go on to get a new job in the NBA in a press release where they described their growth, professionalism, and performance quality to officiate NBA games, which apparently is not a sentiment agreed upon by WNBA coaches. But beyond that, I do think it's interesting that the NBA no longer describes WNBA or G League refs joining the NBA as a promotion, right? Like they're careful to steer away from that language. But what Monty McCutcheon, who is the senior vice president, head of referee development, said in the press release was, congratulations on their advancement to our NBA staff. All 3 officials have worked diligently to reach the pinnacle of their profession. To me, kind of sounds like a promotion, even if you're not using the direct word.
Here's the thing, right? It's the use of advancement instead of promotion, but then walking it back and saying the pinnacle. So you're literally saying this is the zenith. This is the highest
best
point
you can do. Yeah.
Best you can do. But it's not a promotion. It's an advancement. Okay. We can play this game as much as we want. Ben, what did you think about this?
Should we take it to LinkedIn? Like, should we ask the people of LinkedIn, like, what they think
You
or
know
how
what?
they define these terms?
Did Jenna
If
Renault
I get a
announce
new
this on
job
LinkedIn? No.
and I get an advancement, I'm naming it that on LinkedIn moving forward. Advancement. Everyone just change
Jenna Renault
anytime
does
you
have
get...
a LinkedIn page, by the way.
Who does?
Jenna Renault.
I want to know, Jenna, are you posting your advancement? Sorry.
Yeah.
This is so silly.
I mean, Monty McCutcheon has said, and he told me this point blank, if I have one claim to fame in this profession, it is that I think I was the first person to raise this point with the league office back in 2023. I called them out on, for 2018 to 2022, they used the word promote in all of their press releases. And then shortly after talking to a story about officiating in October 2023, right before the NBA puts out their officials release, they used the word moves. When I asked them specifically about the word promotes. And when I asked Monty McCutcheon about it 2 years ago, he basically said that he pushed back on the concept of the WNBA as a perceived feeder league for the NBA, saying that a move from the G League to the W or the NBA is considered a promotion, but moves between the WNBA and the NBA would be lateral. I have not checked back in with Monty McCutcheon on that phrasing 2 years later, but seemingly, per his statement announcing the news earlier this week, advancement doesn't exactly seem like a lateral move. Peak of your profession, pinnacle of your profession does not exactly make it seem like this was a lateral move. So, make of this what you want, folks.
Man, this sounds like, in corporate America, they always say, yeah, sometimes, your career isn't on the ladder, it's monkey bars. And like that is such a thing that people say. And I just feel like this is the same sort of like mumbo jumbo. We know what you're doing. We know what you're doing. And if it was a lateral move, then why is the pay not lateral? Right? Like Sabreena, give me that context. Like WNBA officials are not salaried in the same way that NBA officials are. What's
Yeah,
up with
WNBA
that?
officials, it's a full-time job, salaried with benefits. WNBA officials, no, it's a contract, and they often end up working NCAA or other games to supplement their income over the course of the year. Yeah.
That's advancement. That's
I mean,
just
so
lateral
congrats to Jenna
moves
Renault,
here.
honestly. It sounds like she got a good new job, but it also just begs the question of, you know, is the NBA, WNBA umbrella actually keeping the best officials in the WNBA? And it sounds like no. Or maybe this
Mm,
is just a real, like, olive branch to Shell Reeve, like, "Hey, we did something for you. Look who you won't
wow.
have to see at WNBA games anymore."
Or the opposite of an olive branch and, the use of one of these fingers to be like, about what you said, we're giving out advancements. Okay. On the other side of this break, free agency 101 and the ripple effects that pose big questions for this WNBA offseason. All right. In case you're not aware, this offseason's about to be crazy. Like drama to the T, okay? I've read Marcus Thompson's piece about the offseason, and he was like, bring in Shonda Rhimes. I'm just like, absolutely. This is about to be the levels of drama. Grey's Anatomy, Bridgerton, just gas clutch my pearls. We'll see what happens. But there's going to be a new collective bargaining agreement. We know that's happening. Potential
Maybe,
lockout. Maybe.
maybe happening.
Well, maybe
It's
happening.
happening.
We
Yeah,
know
we
that
just don't know
something has to
when.
be negotiated, right? There's a potential lockout based off around this expansion draft. And oh yeah, literally every player almost is a free agent. There's 41 players that will be signed next year. GMs are going to be busy that are not going to be free agents. So before we dive into the impact of that free agency with some big team specific offseason questions, let's break down what free agency actually means and why it's all the rage this offseason. So, Ben, I'm going to go to you first. Give us the breakdown. What is free agency? I need to understand for everyone listening, restricted, unrestricted. We got to break down coring again. I know we've done this before on the show, but we got some
Sure.
new listeners, so let's break it down.
Yeah, I'll do the big picture and then I'll pass the baton to Sabreena. There are more than 100 there are more than 100 free agents entering this offseason. And pretty much every veteran that we're defining as a player not on a rookie contract, will be set to hit some form of free agency, whether that is restricted free agency, whether that is unrestricted free agency. Some of those players have the ability to be cored. Sabreena can talk about that in a second. Some do not. But the reason being is that around the league, the timing of this coinciding with the CBA is not a coincidence because players and agents have been expecting that the salary cap is going to increase. One of the few points of agreement throughout this negotiation between the league and the players is that the salaries of players is going to increase. By how much? That is obviously the question, as we talked about a couple minutes ago, at the center of this debate. But because they're expecting a jump, we'll say maybe a 3x jump, maybe it's a 4x jump, maybe it's more, players are looking to maximize their earnings. And so in the past couple off seasons, players around the league, veteran players, when they've hit free agency, have signed deals with the intention to then hit free agency this summer. Because then what's going to happen, or this winter, I should say, because then what is going to happen if and when a deal is agreed upon is, instead of signing a contract that would be worth, say, $100,000 through next season, what might have been an $100,000 deal is now potentially worth a $350,000 deal or a $400,000 deal or even more. And so that is really why so many players are hitting the market at this time.
Right. So we have a few different kinds of free agents hitting the market here. We have unrestricted free agents, which means you can sign anywhere you want as a player this offseason. The one exception to that is that there is a core provision that exists in the WNBA, which each team can core one player for up to 2 years, or up to two times, I should say. It's a little bit more complicated. The rules might change in the new CBA. But essentially, when you core a player, that means that you have the opportunity to offer them a 1-year supermax, or you can initiate a sign and trade or some kind of new contract. But basically, you have the opportunity to control their negotiations in that process. So technically unrestricted, but also kind of not totally unrestricted, because the team has a little bit more control than you'd expect in this situation. Usually only apply the core provision to really excellent players, because you don't want to be wasting a supermax contract on a player who is back end of your rotation, you know? Then we have what are
Exactly.
called restricted free agents, which means the team can match any contract offer that you sign. So let's say you're Ryan Howard, you're a restricted free agent, you sign a 3-year deal with the Dallas Wings for $1 million. Atlanta can come back and say, great, we're going to match that, and you're coming back to the Atlanta Dream, and yada, yada, yada. And then we have what are called reserved free agents, which really terrible opportunity for the players, honestly. It's players who have like less than 4 years of service in the WNBA, and essentially you can only negotiate with the team that currently holds your rights, and they only have to offer you a minimum contract. Some teams get a little bit more generous and they offer more money. Like you saw this with, I think Chechi Sandalacini was an example of this last season, where the Valkyries gave her more money than the minimum, as a show of good faith, like, hey, we want you to be here. But yeah, that's what a reserved free agent looks like. So there's 3 basically tiers of free agents, and they all have different opportunities with who they can negotiate with and how much freedom they actually have in the open market.
And what's so messy about all of what you guys just laid out is it's all dependent upon the CBA. Like, we don't know what the numbers are going to be. Sabreena, I smiled when you just said $1 million. I was like, yes, I can live in this fantasy world right now. But that might not be a fantasy for too long, right? Like, we don't know what's going to happen with this new CBA and what they're going to offer and what the core rules are going to be, and all of the ways in which this breaks down. How unusual is this? Like, put this in perspective for us, Ben. This many players being available in one offseason, tying themselves up to this CBA, opening to potentially change their pay, their revenue structure, all of that. This feels unprecedented.
Yeah, I think that is the right word, Zena. It is unprecedented, and it's a combination of all of the factors that we have discussed, the CBAs, the fact that, in the WNBA currently, basically the contracts that players are signing are short-term deals, right? No player can sign a 7-year deal hypothetically, as was the case, say, in the NBA 2.5 decades ago, right? We saw some of these, like, what basically became albatross contracts, and that is not something that players can currently do in the WNBA. And so there, are a number of factors. It's the short-term deal with the CBA, with the explosive business, and it's all coalescing in this offseason. What makes it so messy and complicated is because it's all coalescing, and because the CBA negotiation is in the state that it is, there is not a lot of clarity as to what the rules and regulations will be. So that's why it's really hard for teams to prepare or to project. Teams that have salary cap experts, like I would be super curious to try and understand what their projections and what their models are looking like, because I'm sure you have to run tons and tons of different versions if you want to game out what this offseason will be, because there are just so many questions as to what it will all look like.
Context, I remember reading somewhere this week, it might have been one of you two. I feel like I'm just like constantly consuming, but someone put it in perspective of, like, if we're looking at the NBA, this is like over 100 players being available in one summer, and like not just anyone. It also includes the LeBrons and the Stephs and like all of these big names. When you look at the WNBA, of the first team and the second team, all WNBA, 8 of those players are included in that list. That's crazy. Like, that's crazy. We
All
have no idea
5
what's about to
MVP
happen. So
finalists. Yeah.
MVP finalists, exactly, right? So this is different, and it's going to be very dramatic, not only just from the perspective of like people wanting to get paid and getting paid well now with, a new CBA looming. But there's also a dynasty that they're trying to stop in Vegas. And what is that going to look like? So let's attempt to break down the impact of all this potential movement by looking at some specific teams, starting with the Chicago Sky. Man, that team has had a lot going on this season. And the biggest question is, will Angel Reese be playing in the Windy City next year?
Well, this is a non-free agency related question because Angel Reese is on a rookie contract, still 2 years left on her rookie contract. Obviously, Chicago has some free agents on their roster, including Ariel Atkins, who made
Ariel
our
Atkins,
top
yep.
15 list. And presumably they would want to bring in some more to help their front court of Angel Reese and Camila Cardoso. But that begs the question if you're going to still have Angel and Camila. And obviously there was some, dissatisfaction, I would say, with Angel Reese and the direction of the Chicago Sky that was expressed in a excellent Chicago Tribune article. Kudos to Julia Pope for doing that reporting. But yeah, like Angel clearly wants to compete, wants to be more competitive, wants to be coached harder. Uh, had some problems that need to be resolved with the locker room, right? Like they were not happy with the way that she expressed her opinions out in the public. And I don't know if that's a bridge that can be fixed or if that's something that, Angel just has to move on to another team. Basically, I would not be surprised either way if she decided to stay in Chicago, if she did not want to stay in Chicago. My gut tells me that she is not going to stay in Chicago, but that is not sourced. That's just a gut feeling.
Well, I absolutely agree that whether Angel Reese is there or not is going to impact free agents wanting to get to Chicago, right? Thinking about the future, thinking about who they're playing with, that impacts your potential guard play. Who's she going to play pick and roll with if she's there? If she's not there, what does it look like to partner someone with Camila Cardoso in the middle and being the center point of attention? So this is going to be very interesting for Chicago, especially because a lot of Angel's comments were about needing to elevate Chicago as a landing spot for free agents. That's very, very important in this huge conversation. So let's shift over to the Dallas Wings because this is another team that has a major player on a rookie contract. Paige Beckers ain't going nowhere, but there are other free agents around her, Arike Ogunbowale, that may. This is another team that did not do so well this past season, worst record in the league, and they had the Rookie of the Year on their roster, but it wasn't enough. They asked their coach, Chris Kaklanis, and they're on the search for a new one. They've got very good odds for securing the first pick in the W again. What is the drawing point for Dallas in terms of bringing in some new free agents? Ben, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a pretty appealing situation for a lot of players, especially depending on how the head coach hire turns out. And I do think right now, especially in the interim as the CBA gets sorted out, the priority for the Wings is figuring out the head coach situation, right? You mentioned it. They let go of Chris Koklanis, and we'll see what they do going forward. From what I understand, a coach who has prior head coaching experience, whether that is in the W, whether that's in the NBA, whether that's in college basketball, seems to be important here. And I think there's a recognition inside the Wings, outside the Wings, that this job, the nature of what it entails has changed, right? That as a result of getting Paige Beckers, there are just a lot more eyeballs on the Dallas Wings than there ever have been before. And this is one of the highest profile jobs in the sport because you are coaching one of the highest profile players in the sport. Think about the reaction that Chris Koklanis, on social media, just as an example, the kind of heat he was facing both on social and also in the arena in a lot of cases. And, that just was not the case a few years ago. So I think all that first informs how the Dallas Wings are going to proceed as it relates to then what they do in free agency and how attractive they are. One of the things that, is a good selling point, one, you have Paige Beckers, right? Who's one of the 10 to 15 best players in the league this season, right? She makes all W second team. That's an indication of that. You also have a lot of future draft assets, both that are tradable and also appealing ones like the potential number one pick in the upcoming draft. So I think all things considered, Dallas is a really appealing place to play. The big question, though, is will Arike be there? And she has spent the entirety of her career there. And it certainly seems like this past season, they turned the keys to the car over to Paige and
Yeah.
not Arike Ogunbowale.
That's my question, Sabreena. I mean, there was so much hype around the Arike and Paige backcourt. It's going to be dynamic. It's going to be explosive. The production's going to be there. And we saw it in very small spurts, but not in the consistency that we expected it to be. And we also saw it where it was like one's on, one's off, right? Not this tandem duo that was expected. So I'm wondering, we know in the past, Dallas has very much historically loved their bigs, love focusing on their bigs, but now they've got a generational talent in a guard that they need to ensure is supported and insulated. What are your thoughts on what could happen or what Dallas could be looking for in free agency?
I mean, I think it makes sense to find her a front court partner. Like they went through a lot of young players this year, tried out an Alyssa Smith, traded for Lee Rue. You got to see a little Haley Jones renaissance there. I think Maisha Hines Allen was sort of like the lone veteran stabilizer in that front court. But like Paige's career in UConn was really amplified, when she got to play next to a Sarah Strong or, when she was surrounded by like the Dorka Yuhas and Olivia Nelson Adotas of the world at UConn. I think getting a long-term front court piece makes a lot of sense first. The beautiful thing about building around Paige in the backcourt is you can kind of just see who's available because like if you want Paige to lean into her scoring ability, she can do that. If you want her to lean into her playmaking ability, she can do that. So it's not like you have to find a pure point guard or a pure two or somebody like that fits a defined role. Paige is malleable in a way that like it's easier to build around her in the backcourt. And then, in terms of like being attractive to play in Dallas, like no state tax at Texas, right? They got a practice facility coming in 2026. They're going to be playing at a new
It's a big one.
downtown arena soon enough. Like there's a lot of up and up happening with the Wings, even if there has been a lot of front office instability that, doesn't really affect the players as much, I would think. It's still a place where you can go and play with one of the best young players in the game. So, yeah, I think what Ben was talking about, like with regards to the coaching staff and like the pressure on that job, I think that doesn't apply. I haven't seen it hit the players as much. Like you kind of saw it in Indiana this year where like a lot of the role players like were blamed for things when Caitlin Clark's team didn't do
Oh,
well, right?
right. Mm-hmm.
But I don't
Mm-hmm.
think we've seen that happen yet in Dallas. And I don't think that's going to be, I just don't expect it to happen to the same effect in Dallas. So if I were a player, I think this would be a very attractive situation to go to. And like, again, the way Paige plays, you can be basically any player in the W and think like I could fit next to her.
Sure.
I do think we should spend another minute though on Arike in particular because where she might end up in this offseason is very interesting, right? You have to look at it. She is one of the best scorers historically in the WNBA, right? She's a 3-time All-W team member. She scored more than 20 points on average 3 times throughout her career, more than 21. That is, she's led the league in scoring. And yes, she averaged a career low 15 and a half points per game on 36% shooting this year. But like, I think she could still very much thrive in certain situations. I mean, we brought up the situation in Chicago. It wouldn't be surprising if that's a spot for Arike Ogunbowale, right? Put in
Yeah.
a lead guard who is dynamic, who can score the basketball. Think about her alongside those front court players. Or she's certainly the kind of player, and Sabreena and I put this in our potential fit story that you can find on the site now, like Toronto or Portland. Like build your offense around Arike Ogunbowale. You could do a lot worse as a starting point than building around one of the best scorers in the league and hoping that she has a bounce back year. And suddenly your offense, has potential during the game and in late game
Mm.
situations that maybe it didn't before, just by plugging her in and building around her. So she's really interesting as kind of a pivot point this offseason.
That's really a big storyline that we're going to be following throughout this offseason and once this free agency eventually picks up. Um, because all of these players that may have had to take a smaller role because someone's come in, and as you said, Ben had the keys handed to them, they have the opportunity to start new franchises, right? They have the opportunity to make history, and it could be their choice, as opposed to what we see in expansion drafts, like with the 6 women of the year kind of coming together in the Golden State Valkyries. Like this could be a situation which they're like, I'm choosing this new team. I'm choosing to start something new and allowing myself to be at the center of it. I'm very curious as to what Arike is going to do, but I will say, I look at Dallas, Haley Jones with there, kind of revive things. I'm seeing Grace Berger, Amy Okonkwo, all these names that were able to play alongside her. I think the malleability, Sabreena, that you alluded to, I feel like Paige is the tide that raises all ships. And so anyone that gets to play down there in Dallas, you're going to be in a good situation. Now let's switch to a team whose performance during an injury-laden season was very inspiring, by the way, but it also shocked a lot of us, and that was the Indiana Fever. Sabreena, you just mentioned them. The goal this past year, especially with their free agent signings, was a championship, period. And Caitlin Clark said it herself before she was sidelined in July. They didn't get there, but they made things uncomfortable for folks, okay? They got very close. So without Caitlin, And without several key players, they were able to play to the level of competition. Now looking ahead, they'll be able to have the health of some of these players that they had to sideline. How does this team continue to build? And also, how do they ensure that whoever they probably bring in, they don't have another DeWanna Bonner situation in which a player might come in, feel as if they're supposed to have a particular role, and then it doesn't play out that way?
Yeah, Indiana is such a fascinating situation because the identity they built post Caitlin Clark was obviously very successful and yet not quite good enough to get to them where they wanted to
Yeah.
be, right? Like they clearly needed another scoring guard, like, a shot creator who could actually, play make for others, which incidentally describes Caitlin Clark pretty well. But the defensive identity they leaned into with Odyssey Sims, with the replacement players that they had to bring in, like Ari McDonald and stuff, like that's just a different team than the one with Caitlin Clark leading at point guard. So it's kind of like, how do we build off of the success of last year, but also get back to building a team around Caitlin? And like, that's honestly a big challenge for Amber Cox and Kelly Crosskoff, as they look forward to this next iteration of the Indiana Fever. I think you obviously got to keep Lexi Hull. She's just so crucial to any lineup that's on the court.
Absolutely.
I don't know why I led with Lexi Hull when Kelsey Mitchell is still there. You got to keep Kelsey Mitchell. She's, the most critical piece, like the heart of the Indiana Fever. That power forward spot is always very interesting to me because, like, you got later in the season and Stephanie White, like, didn't trust Natasha Howard's defense enough to keep her in the game. And, like, they were throwing out Michaela Timpson. And it's like, do you want to go a little bit smaller and, like, play Sophie Cunningham at that spot? Do you want to get another attractive power forward on the free agent market? Like, Nako Gumake is a free agent. Is that somebody who would want to do like a 1-year role in Indiana? Or obviously not DeWanna Bonner, but like there are other power forward free agents who, could make their way to Indiana. I don't think Angel Reese is a fit here. For those who are wondering, like that's not a trade that I'd be pursuing if I were the Indiana Fever. But once again, I think like that 3-4 area is sort of where you need to identify like who's going to fit around Aaliyah, Kelsey, and Caitlin, because Lexi Hull was just like tasked with so much during the season. Like if she got in foul trouble, it's like the ground just came crashing out underneath the Indiana Fever. So I think upgrading that front court and like how you figure out a way to both maximize Caitlin but also lean into like the way I think Steph White wants to play is just a really interesting challenge.
Mm.
The other thing that I think we'll have to wait and see on as it relates to Indiana going forward is what does the rest of their coaching staff look like, right? I think we know that Steph White, or we certainly expect that Steph White will be back this next season after a masterful job this past year guiding Indiana to the league semifinals, to the cusp of the finals. But there certainly is a possibility that as the next couple of weeks progress, the next couple of months progress, and these teams make hires like Bree January, Austin Kelly, those are two names that we often hear as it relates to the coaching carousel. That's not to say that either of them are locks to get jobs, but that's just another potential question that they might have to sort out going forward, in addition to all of the roster questions that Sabreena just laid out.
That's a good point. So, Sabreena laying out missing for the Fever, definitely that secondary guard. And I love the point that there is a difference between the Caitlin Clark version of the Fever and the version they had to cobble together. And that version worked well with Odyssey Sims and Kelsey Mitchell. But will it work well when Caitlin's back? So missing that secondary guard position could be, we'll see what happens with the coaching staff looking at the 4 position. Okay, that makes sense as to what to look for during the free agent market. Are there any names, Sabreena, you mentioned a few, but Ben, are there any guard names that you're thinking of that could be a nice addition? Or are there any guards from that roster that you're like could be utilized somewhere else?
Well, in terms of guards, I mean, like if I'm them, I'm making whatever the equivalent of the biggest plea I can for Jackie Young. Like, I don't think I would expect her to leave, right? But she is an Indiana native. She played
Yep.
at Notre Dame. If you can ever try and lure someone out of the Las Vegas Aces ecosystem, that is a player that I'm certainly going after, making the biggest swing I can. We should say that Nikki Fargas, the team president of the Aces, she told me and another reporter during the finals, like, she wants to keep the trio together, but make of that what you will. And other names, I mean, I think that are attainable, like Sabreena and I potentially mapped out. Azuri Stevens is an interesting name to watch,
Ooh,
right? In
I
kind of
like
a
that.
4-5 role. We've seen someone in Azure, like a 38% three-point shooter this past season, more efficient, more aggressive than she's been, can stretch the floor, a little younger than Natasha Howard. So, like, maybe her as a front court upgrade partner alongside Aaliyah Boston. That's another name that I think is certainly way more attainable than Jackie Young and is one to watch for going forward.
Yeah, I definitely think you need to stretch something alongside Aaliyah Boston. And the highlight will be beautiful with Azrae Stevens and Aaliyah Boston. Okay, you guys got ideas circulating in my mind now. All right, let's keep going, and we're going to move eastward this time to New York. Somewhat of a disappointing season, somewhat of a lackluster season. I know if you asked a lot of folks who you thought is going to be gangbusters, especially with their midseason acquisitions, with Emma Meeseman joining this team already, Sabreena Ionescu, Breanna Stewart, Jonquel Jones on the squad. Like, it felt like, oh, they're going to run it back. The champions are going to look good. Well, they were okay. And they lost their head coach. Zena Brondello gets excused from her role. A new head coach is entering the mix, and everything that's going on with free agency. Does the Liberties core make sense to keep? That is JJ, Breanna, and Sabreena. And looking at this team, remember, Benajelane Hamilton is supposed to be coming back, right? And Niara Sabli's in the mix again. Like, who could be on the move from this team?
Oh, you mentioned some of those names. I mean, Jonathan Kolb said, and he's the general manager of the Liberty, at his, I guess, post Sandy Brondello change press conference that, yeah, that, he certainly expects and hopes that Jonquel Jones, Sabreena Ionescu, and Breanna Stewart will all be back next year. Again, they all are free agents, but that is their priority number one. I mean, I think everything first starts at trying to retain Jonquel Jones in particular, right? Knowing that she's played with other teams. So is Stewie, but Stewie seems to be really attached to New York, and Stu York seems like her budding brand that she's trying to create. But as it relates to JJ, like we saw JJ in particular struggle a lot last year, both because of injury. She never really found her footing, but also in the playoffs, right? She scored just 17 combined points in those 3 first-round games that New York played in. So, yes, Jonathan Kolb has the utmost confidence they'll all be back, but we'll wait and see there. Assuming, though, that all 3 of them are back, I think that's when the changes really start to occur. You mentioned Benajelane Hamilton. She certainly proved by not being there this season her value even more than she was when she was in the lineup. I think they really are so high on Leonie Fibic as a player that, they had overseas for a number of years and who has come in and they love these long wings. They love size. They love shooting. They love athleticism. Like, she checks the box of the kind of player that New York wants to have in their lineup going forward. I think from there on out, like, that's where we start to see some potential roster shifts. I mean, someone like Kennedy Burke and Rebecca Gardner had really good years for New York, but will there be someone else playing next to Sabreena Ionescu in the backcourt? Is Natasha Cloud back? That is really a question. What happens at the end of the bench with players like Maureen Johannes? You mentioned Niara Sabli. Like, I wouldn't bank necessarily on her coming back. She could be a player who, gets taken somewhere else in the expansion draft too, depending on how New York wants to play it. So I think that's where the optionality starts for New York. But I think the first change they're going to make is figuring out that head coach, not let's break up the big 3 of the roster.
Makes sense. Sabreena, if you're looking at that team, you're looking at the production of that team, putting health aside and imagining they're 100%. Does that core still make sense to you to retain?
Yeah, it's hard to figure that out because, like, I'm probably higher on Jonquel Jones than just about anybody in the national media. Like, just her overall ceiling, and you saw it in the 2024 finals when she was the Finals MVP, in 2023 when she was the Commissioner's Cup Final MVP. Like, I think her being at her best is what elevates New York to being at its best. I think Breanna Stewart sort of sets the floor for the New York Liberty, and Jonquel Jones elevates them to their ceiling. And we saw in the playoffs, like, she had nothing against the Phoenix Mercury, and I couldn't tell if that was the system that the Liberty brought in 2025, like with the 5 out, just didn't optimize her the same way, or it was her recovering from injury and never fully getting back to herself, or does she not have it anymore? Like, I really don't know. I mean, she's only 31 years old. I can't believe that she doesn't have it anymore, but like, she is one of the most unique frontcourt pieces in the WNBA, and like, there, in my opinion, would be a lot of interest in getting her if she was interested in moving from the New York Liberty. But she just has to be so much better for the New York Liberty to be what they want to be. And again, like, I'm not close enough to know what it was that prevented her from being the Jonquel Jones that they needed, because like the version of this team doesn't work unless she is JJ. And if she is not going to be that player, then they're going to have to reevaluate like what this team looks like.
That was the number one thing that I felt like everyone said about New York is Jonquel Jones is the X factor. How is she not putting more shots up? how is she not more involved in what they're doing? There were too many games in which you're seeing her put up 4 shots or 5 shots or anything under 10, and you're like, no, there's got to be more production coming out of her and utilizing her a lot better. Okay, well, New York's going to have a lot of work to do, but as Ben mentioned, it's going to start at the top. This free agency situation is going to be absolutely insane. Out of these teams that we've already talked about, just to close it out, are there any others? I know we didn't cover all the free agents, but are there any other teams that you're like, I'm definitely keeping an eye on what they do in free agency?
Yeah, for me, it's Phoenix. I mean, it's not just coming off this finals run, but I think heading into it, and we talked about this a little bit during the series itself, that players around the league recognize that this seems to be a really attractive place to play, or that is certainly the perception that
Mm,
people have because of starting with the facility, frankly. Like the
It's really
facility that
nice.
they have, it's a really nice facility. It's really open air. It's a very
Huge.
airy facility, very bright. It's huge. And players are treated really well there. They can access the building whenever they want. And it really does show, it does really reflect investment from the ownership group. And so you start with that, and then you list off some of the players that they have or that, seemingly the core is built around Alyssa Thomas, Kalia Copper, and Satu Sabali. And that's a pretty great starting point as we have seen for the Mercury. And so that is a team that, we've seen be aggressive in past free agencies. And I would expect to again be aggressive, knowing that, yeah, they might have made the finals this year, but there is still a gap that they need to close before, winning, getting over that hump. And they certainly recognize that, like, the competition behind them or behind them this year in terms of the final standings, like, is right there, right?
mm,
They have a long way to go to make that leap, and I think they'll be an active player in free agency, certainly.
Yeah,
absolutely.
team
Sabrina,
I
what
have an
about
eye
you?
on is Minnesota. I don't know what this team is going to look like next year. We saw the tears from Kayla McBride after they lost Game 4 of the semifinals,
Mm,
and just the understanding that we had a 2-year run with this crew, this very special crew. Once they added Courtney Williams and Atisha Heidemann and Alana Smith, and juiced the existing Carlton McBride Collier trio to a finals worthy contender. And it's just gonna be really hard to keep them together because first of all, you have to consider the expansion draft when they have more than 6 players they'll need to protect just to get through that in terms of who Portland and Toronto are going to want to take, right? Like we've talked about, Bridget Carleton going to Toronto makes almost too much sense. So you have to worry about that. And then literally 6, 7 players on their roster are unrestricted free agents. And you can't keep all of them. You can only core one of them, probably going to be Nafisa Collier, maybe not. And if she decides that she wants to come back and you don't have to waste that on her. But everybody just has a decision of where they want to go. Like K-Mac's already been there for 5 years. Does she think about going somewhere else? Like Alana Smith, we talked about Jonquil Jones being a unique piece that can fit anywhere. Alana Smith's basically Diet JJ. She would be the the answer for whoever misses out on that option, And then Courtney Williams, Tisha Heidemann, Carlton, Jess Shepard, these are all players who made valuable contributions for the Lynx and would be valuable rotation players elsewhere. So there's just so much uncertainty with the Lynx. They basically punted on their last few draft picks to try to upgrade this roster, in the hopes of getting closer to a championship, and it didn't happen this year because of their injuries. Uh, it just was such a fun team to watch over these last 2 years, and I imagine it's going to look entirely different. I just don't know what sort of changes are going to happen coming forward.
makes sense. I'm keeping an eye out on the expansion teams. This is going to be a very different situation than the Golden State Valkyries had in terms of it was a limited free agent market for them to be able to pick from, but they had already done a lot of their work during the expansion draft of who they wanted to have their main team be built around. This time around, Portland and Toronto are going to have all the pickings to be able to look around after the expansion draft and say, who else do we want to, add onto our roster? There's a lot more players available for them to choose. So it'll be very interesting how all that plays out. We will keep you guys posted on everything free agency, especially with the CBA looming. It won't start until that is figured out. So we'll make sure you guys are kept up to date. Let us know, what teams are you looking at? What free agents are you curious about? We definitely want to hear about it. Okay, to close this out, we've got a fun little segment called Say What? And these are social media moments that made us go, I'm sorry? Wait, what?
Sort of
I
like a team
I
announcing
had
their head coach on LinkedIn, yeah?
I mean, that was one of them. That was one of them. Let's call that the cheat code. That's like an example, a perfect example of the say what. I don't know, Ben, Sabreena, where you guys are at. I'll quickly say mine. It was an announcement, and it was when the Dallas Wings announced that they were waiving or trading, excuse me, Nalissa Smith. And then it wasn't even just their post to say thank you to Nalissa Smith. It was also, you know, right alongside Kayla Charles. It was Nalissa Smith tweeting out that she was basically blindsided. And we've seen this in various sports. But it was Nalissa Smith basically tweeting out that she was sick to her stomach over the situation. I'll read the tweet. Sick to my stomach, dog. Never seen this coming. But I love you, Dallas Nation. Thank you for everything. I was like, and then followed up with Dejanay Carrington's heartbreak emoji, who was still on the team. It was just, there was drama from the relationship perspective. There was drama from the fact that she was traded away. It just felt, I think a lot of people were just like, whoa, where did this come from? It ended up being one of the best trades ever for the Las Vegas Aces that were able to utilize her talents for the rest of the season. But that was the one that made me go, who, what? When it was sent to my phone.
I have just a much lighter thing that kind of caught my eye, and it is in the graphics vein, like the Portland Fires. It is a recent statistic. I guess maybe you can call it a statistic. Maybe it's just a fact. I don't even know. From the Phoenix Mercury, they put out a graphic at the end of September. Once they made the finals, it said first WNBA team to make it to 2 finals in a 5-year span without a single carryover player. And you might be thinking to yourself, what is a carryover player? That is not a formal term. That is not a formal statistic. And that is the reaction seemingly of a lot of people, because that tweet has more than 2 million views on Twitter, on X, and some of the replies are pretty great, including one classic NBA, or I guess it's a Fox graphic from an NBA game that says like players with 800 games to average 13.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, 1.4 steals, 49% field goal, 30% threes, just random numbers. And it's Magic, Larry Bird, MJ, LeBron, and Thaddeus Young, who is just a career role player, borderline starter for all those not familiar with Thad Young's left-handed game. That's what that graphic by the Mercury really did remind me of. Someone else sent me a classic graphic that Penn State football put out a couple years ago that said a Penn Stater has appeared in every Super Bowl, and that's all in big letters. And then underneath it, it said except for 5 since 1967. Maybe I'll give the Mercury a little bit of a pass there.
Text.
But like that's what their big graphic reminded me of. There you go, Zena. I got the what out of you, so I think this was a successful addition to the segment.
Yeah. No, I love the like random stat muse type of like nuggets that make you feel good about yourself. Like, congrats, Mercury. I didn't know we were going to dig that deep to find a graphic to make as you make it to the finals. Like, you should be very happy about that. But yeah, that's a good one. I like that, Ben. What about you, Sabreena?
So Ben has this thing during the season where we like extend the MVP conversation too long, just too many names in the discussion. And this is sort of in that vein. Dallas Wings, will go back to their social account, had a post for Arike Ogunbowale to make all WNBA this year, highlighting her stats. And just like, why would you put Arike in this discussion? We just mentioned she only averaged 15.5 points, career worst 36% from the field. Like, this seems like a very silly thing to do. And then you notice, first comment on the post, Arike Ogunbowale saying, delete, not this year.
Well, she was like, don't put me in this. Okay, what? This is embarrassing for me now to try and put myself in this conversation. That's good. I didn't even see that. That's hilarious. Okay, yeah, I'm with it. I love when the players are also involved in the social media comments and letting their admins know, this ain't it. Take this down, please. We're going to keep up with the say whats. Y'all got to tell us, what else did y'all see throughout the season that made you go, double take? Why would you post this? Why would you say this? Who approved this? That's really the essence of these say what moments. Who approved this? All right, guys, that is all we have for you today. WNBA season is over, but there's so much to talk about still. So we'll be back on Tuesday. We're going to get into it all, kind of do like a little post-mortem. Let us know, what do y'all want to talk about? What do you want us to cover? We want to make sure that we wrap it up nicely. Wherever you're listening, please follow our show. And if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. Let your friends know that we're cool and you like us. And while you're at it, give us a rating, drop a comment. If it's a bad one, like, put it in your pocket. It's cool. You can like bring that somewhere else. We want positive energy. You want to know what we're doing well. The critique can go to our producers. We love to hear from you guys, period. So definitely reach out, subscribe, all the above. And of course, head on over to our partner, Yahoo Sports Hub. There's more content there. sports.yahoo.com/women's-sports. On behalf of The Athletic, Sabreena Merchant, Ben Pickman, and the Dallas Swing social account, I'm Zena Cada, signing off saying, say what? No, I'm joking. We'll see you guys next time. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in to No Off Season. To hear more, be sure to like and subscribe. We drop new episodes every Tuesday and Friday.